The radio crackled with a dying man's voice, trapped beneath tons of concrete where no rescue team dared enter. Taylor McKenna made a choice that would cost her everything, until 17 motorcycles arrived at her door, and the man she saved brought an army to stand beside her. Taylor stood behind the incident command vehicle, one hand pressed against her lower back, the other clutching the radio that connected her to the chaos. 5 months pregnant and relegated to desk duty, she'd been monitoring communications while her crew worked the collapsed parking garage downtown. The newly constructed structure had pancaked without warning during morning rush, trapping dozens of vehicles and an unknown number of people inside. The February cold bit through her jacket, but sweat still dampened her collar. Her baby kicked against her ribs as if sensing her tension. Through the command vehicle's window, she could see Fire Chief Brennan coordinating rescue teams, his face grim in the emergency lights that painted everything red and blue. "Command, this is Rescue 3. The voice on the radio was strained, professional. "We've located a survivor in the northeast motorcycle bay. Structure's too unstable for entry. Requesting engineering assessment before we proceed." Taylor's fingers tightened on the radio. She'd reviewed the architectural plans for this garage 6 months ago during the final inspection phase. Something about the load-bearing calculations had troubled her then, enough that she'd filed a report. That report had disappeared into bureaucratic silence. "Rescue 3, hold position." Chief Brennan's voice came through clear and absolute. "Engineering says that section could pancake completely. We're not risking lives for a recovery operation. Chief, he's alive." The rescue captain's voice carried an edge. "Says his leg's pinned, losing feeling. We can hear him, but we can't reach him." Taylor moved closer to the barrier tape, studying the collapsed structure. Dawn light was breaking now, revealing the full scope of devastation. The garage's upper floors had compressed downward like a closing accordion, but the motorcycle bay, she remembered it from the plans. It was at the northwest corner, not northeast. If there was a route, it would be through the old ventilation system that connected to the loading dock. Her radio crackled again. This time the voice was different, weaker. Someone had switched to the emergency frequency. "Is anyone there? Please. I can't feel my legs anymore." The man's voice cut through protocol and procedure, raw with pain and the kind of fear that came from understanding your own mortality. Taylor's hand moved instinctively to her belly. Her daughter. She'd learned it was a girl 2 weeks ago. Kicked again, stronger this time. "All units, emergency frequency is for rescue communications only." Chief Brennan's tone was sharp. "Civilian, we know your location. Help is coming, but you need to stay calm and preserve your air. Tell my club," the voice broke, coughed. "Tell them Diesel went out trying to save his bike." A bitter laugh followed, then silence. Taylor closed her eyes and the architectural plans materialized in her memory with perfect clarity. The ventilation shaft ran along the western wall, protected by the original building's foundation. It would be tight, unstable, but possible. The motorcycle bay had reinforced ceiling supports. It was in her report, one of the few sections built to proper specification. If she could reach the access panel from the loading dock, navigate through the shaft, she could get to him. McKenna. Lieutenant Patricia Chen appeared at her elbow, concern etched across her features. "You okay? You look pale." "I know how to get to him." Taylor's words came out before she could stop them. "The ventilation system. I reviewed those plans during inspection." Chen's expression shifted from concern to alarm. "Taylor, you're on admin leave, you're pregnant. You're not going anywhere near that structure. Someone has to tell them about the access route. Then tell them. But you're not—" Chen stopped, reading something in Taylor's face. "No, absolutely not. Don't even think about it." But Taylor was already thinking about it. Thinking about how long it would take to explain the route to someone who hadn't seen the plans, who didn't know the building's peculiar layout. Thinking about how many minutes that man had left before shock or crushing injuries claimed him. Thinking about how she'd felt when the ultrasound tech had said, "It's a girl," and how her daughter deserved to grow up knowing her mother was someone who didn't leave people to die. "Find Chief Brennan," Taylor said quietly. "Tell him I found a possible access route through the loading dock ventilation system." Chen nodded, relief crossing her face, and hurried toward the command vehicle. Taylor watched her go, then looked back at the collapsed structure. The morning sun touched the twisted metal and broken concrete, making shadows that seemed to point toward the western edge. Toward the loading dock she knew was there, hidden behind emergency vehicles and debris. Toward the man called Diesel, who was running out of time. Her radio was still in her hand. Her gear bag was in her truck, 30 feet away. The decision crystallized like ice forming on still water. Sharp, clear, inevitable. She'd spent 7 years as a firefighter, 5 of them watching male colleagues doubt her capabilities. Then Brett had left when she told him about the baby, as if pregnancy was contagion rather than life. Chief Brennan had moved her to admin for her safety. Never mind that she was perfectly capable of assessing her own limitations. Everyone treating her like she was already broken, already less than what she'd been. Nobody got to decide her courage but her. Taylor walked to her truck with measured steps, nothing hurried or suspicious. She pulled out her turnout coat and helmet, strapping them on with practiced efficiency. The weight settled on her shoulders like an old friend's embrace. She left the heavy pants, she couldn't fit into them anymore anyway, but grabbed her work gloves, flashlight, and the small hydraulic spreader she kept for vehicle extractions. The loading dock was accessible from the street side, away from the main command presence. Taylor moved along the perimeter, staying behind vehicles and equipment. Nobody stopped her. In full gear, she looked like she belonged, like she was on assignment rather than defying direct orders. The loading dock's entrance was partially blocked by debris, but she squeezed through, grateful for once for her smaller frame. Inside, emergency lighting cast everything in harsh shadow. The ventilation access panel was where she remembered, mounted low on the western wall, designed for maintenance access. She keyed her radio to the emergency frequency. "Diesel, my name is Taylor. I'm coming to get you. Can you hear me?" Static then. "You're what?" "Lady, they said nobody could." "They're wrong. Stay awake and keep talking to me. What kind of bike were you riding?" 78 Shovelhead. Custom rebuild. Took me 3 years. His voice strengthened slightly with the distraction. "You really coming? Or am I hallucinating?" "Really coming." Taylor pried the access panel open, revealing the ventilation shaft. It was maybe 2 feet square, tight, but manageable. "Keep talking. Tell me about the rebuild." She crawled into the darkness, flashlight between her teeth, spreader strapped to her back. The shaft was lined with old insulation that crumbled at her touch, filling the air with dust that made her cough. Her belly scraped against the bottom of the shaft, and her daughter kicked in protest. "Are you insane?" Chen's voice exploded on the main frequency. "Command, McKenna's entered the structure. Southwest loading dock. She's in the goddamn ventilation system." Taylor switched off her main radio, keeping only the emergency frequency active. Behind her, she heard shouting, but she was already 20 feet into the shaft, too far to pull back easily, too committed to stop. "Hello?" Diesel's voice cracked through the speaker. "Taylor? You still there?" "Still here. Tell me about the Shovelhead." He talked, and she crawled. The shaft angled downward, following the original building's foundation. Concrete groaned around her, settling and shifting with sounds like distant thunder. Twice she had to stop while tremors shook debris from the shaft walls. Each time her daughter went still inside her, as if the baby understood the need for silence. "Started with a basket case from a junkyard," Diesel was saying, his voice dreamy now with shock or blood loss. "Frame was solid, but everything else was trash. Rebuilt the engine myself, learned from YouTube and old manuals. Sounds stupid, but that bike was the first thing I ever finished. Not stupid." Taylor's voice was strained as she squeezed past a collapsed support beam. "Finishing things matters." "Yeah." A long pause. "You got people waiting for you? Someone who's gonna be pissed you're crawling through hell for a stranger?" "My daughter." The words came unbidden. "She's not born yet, 5 months along." The silence that followed was profound. "Jesus Christ," Diesel finally whispered. "You're pregnant and you're in here?" "Nobody else was coming. You need to go back. Right now. I'm not worth—" "Yes, you are." Taylor's voice was fierce. "Everyone's worth it. That's the whole damn point." She emerged from the shaft into what remained of the motorcycle bay. The space was a twisted nightmare of collapsed concrete and crushed vehicles. Emergency lights from the street filtered through gaps in the rubble, creating harsh angles of light and shadow. The air was thick with concrete dust and the smell of gasoline. "Diesel, I'm here. Where are you?" "Southwest corner, under the yellow support beam." Taylor swung her flashlight, finding him. He was maybe 40, with graying dark hair matted with blood and a leather vest that said Road Kings MC across the back. A concrete beam the size of a telephone pole had crushed his motorcycle, and his leg was pinned between the bike and the beam. His face was gray with shock, but his eyes were clear. Those eyes widened when her flashlight revealed her profile. "You weren't kidding about the pregnant thing." "Nope." Taylor knelt beside him, assessing the situation. The beam rested on the motorcycle's frame, which was the only thing preventing it from crushing his leg completely. The bike had become a fulcrum, distributing some of the weight. "How's your pain level?" "Been better. Can't feel my foot anymore." He studied her face. "What's your name? Full name, I mean. If we're dying together, I should know." "Taylor McKenna, and we're not dying." She unpacked the hydraulic spreader, positioning it between the beam and a section of intact floor. "I'm going to create lift. When I do, you pull yourself out, fast as you can. What about you? If that beam shifts, I'll be right behind you." She met his eyes. "On 3, 1. The building groaned, a deep sound that resonated through the concrete. Dust rained from above. Diesel's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. "Wait. If this goes wrong and you make it out," his voice was urgent. "Road Kings Clubhouse, Highway 17, tell them Diesel said you're protected. You understand? Use those exact words." "Nothing's going wrong." But Taylor nodded. "Road Kings, Highway 17, I'm protected. And your daughter. When she's born, tell her she's protected too. The club takes care of its own, and anyone who saves one of us is ours." A contraction hit Taylor then, not labor, just stress-induced cramping that stole her breath. She gritted her teeth and waited for it to pass. Diesel's grip tightened on her wrist. "You okay?" "Fine. Ready?" "No, but let's do it anyway." Taylor activated the spreader. The hydraulic pump whined, and the beam shifted upward an inch, 2 inches. Free. Metal screamed against concrete. Somewhere above them, something gave way with a crack like a gunshot. "Now," Taylor shouted. Diesel pulled himself forward, dragging his injured leg clear of the motorcycle. Taylor released the spreader and grabbed him under his arms, hauling him toward the ventilation shaft entrance. The beam crashed down behind them, and the motorcycle disappeared under tons of falling concrete. The collapse was coming. Taylor could feel it in the way the floor vibrated, the way the air pressure changed. She shoved Diesel toward the shaft opening. "Go! Crawl! Not without you." He was trying to turn around in the tight space. "I'm right behind you." She pushed him harder, and he started moving, crawling despite his injured leg, but she wasn't right behind him. A secondary collapse sent a shower of debris down, and Taylor threw herself over Diesel's legs, shielding him as concrete rained on her back and shoulders. Something hit her hard between the shoulder blades, driving the air from her lungs. Her helmet took another impact that left her ears ringing. Then Diesel was pulling her, his hands locked on her arms, dragging her forward through the shaft even as his wounded leg left a trail of blood on the concrete. They crawled together through the darkness, the building collapsing behind them in stages, each section falling like dominoes. Emergency lights blazed as they emerged from the loading dock. Hands reached for them. Chen and Chief Brennan, and half the fire department. They pulled Taylor and Diesel clear just as the entire western section of the parking garage collapsed inward with a roar that shook the ground. Taylor lay on the cold pavement, gasping. Paramedics swarmed around Diesel, cutting away his jeans to access his crushed leg. Other medics reached for Taylor, their faces tight with concern. "The baby," she managed. "Check the baby." They laid her on a gurney, and someone placed a fetal monitor on her belly. The steady rhythm of her daughter's heartbeat filled the air, fast, stressed, but strong. Taylor closed her eyes, tears finally coming. "You're the craziest person I've ever met," Diesel called from his own gurney as they loaded him into an ambulance. "And I owe you my life, Taylor McKenna. Remember what I said. Road Kings. Protected." Then he was gone, sirens wailing, and Chief Brennan was standing over Taylor with an expression of pure fury. "My office. As soon as you're cleared from the hospital." The contractions started in the ambulance, real ones this time, coming every 5 minutes. By the time they reached the hospital, Taylor was in active premature labor at 22 weeks. Too early, dangerously early. Dr. Patel met them in the emergency bay, her face grave. "We need to stop this labor. The baby's not viable yet." They gave her medications that made her heart race and her hands shake. They monitored and measured and whispered in corners. Hours passed in a blur of fear and pain and prayers to gods she wasn't sure she believed in. Finally, near midnight, the contractions slowed and stopped. Dr. Patel's smile was tired but genuine. "We've stabilized you both. Bed rest for the next week, minimum. Then we'll reassess." "My job," Taylor whispered. "We'll still be there, or it won't. Either way, it matters less than keeping you and your daughter alive." But the job wasn't there. Chief Brennan came to her hospital room the next morning, his face carved from stone. "You're suspended effective immediately, pending termination proceedings for insubordination, reckless endangerment, and violation of administrative leave orders." Taylor had expected this, but the words still hit like physical blows. "I saved a man's life. You violated a direct order. You entered an unstable structure while pregnant. You risked not only your life but your child's." Brennan's voice was cold. "I can't have firefighters who think they can disregard orders whenever they feel like playing hero. He would have died. Maybe, or maybe the engineering team would have found a safe entry point. We'll never know, because you decided your judgment was more important than the chain of command." He set a folder on her bedside table. "Termination hearing is in 3 weeks. I suggest you get a lawyer." After he left, Taylor opened the folder. Inside were the charges against her, laid out in bureaucratic detail. Clipped to the back was a newspaper article. "Firefighter ignores orders, saves trapped man in daring rescue." The article painted her as reckless, a loose cannon who'd gotten lucky. It quoted anonymous sources within the fire department calling her emotionally unstable and suggesting her pregnancy had impaired her judgment. There was no mention of her inspection report from 6 months ago, no questions about why the garage had collapsed in the first place. Chen visited that afternoon, bringing flowers and guilt written across her face. "I should have stopped you. I knew what you were thinking. Nobody could have stopped me." Taylor managed a weak smile. "How's Diesel?" "Surgery went well. They saved his leg. He's asking about you actually. Keeps telling anyone who listened that you're a guardian angel." Chen hesitated. "There's something else. The media's not being kind. There's talk you only went in there because you wanted attention, or because pregnancy made you irrational." "Of course there is. And the preliminary collapse investigation came back. Taylor, they're saying it was contractor negligence, substandard materials and falsified inspection reports. Your report from 6 months ago has suddenly resurfaced." Taylor sat up straighter, ignoring the pull of her the fourth. "What?" "Someone's trying to bury it. The construction company, Aldrich Development. They're major donors to the mayor's campaign. There's pressure to keep this quiet, blame it on unpredictable structural failure. But if your report becomes public, it proves they knew there were problems. So now I'm not just insubordinate, I'm a whistleblower." Chen's expression was grim. "And whistleblowers tend to have accidents, or get discredited. Taylor, you need to be careful." The threats started 2 days later. Phone calls in the middle of the night, heavy breathing, click, dial tone. A brick through her living room window with a note. "Keep your mouth shut." Her tires slashed in the hospital parking lot. The police took reports and did nothing. The construction company's lawyers sent cease and desist letters, threatening defamation suits if she discussed her allegations publicly. Her union representative was sympathetic but pessimistic about her chances at the termination hearing. Taylor went home to an empty house that no longer felt safe. She couldn't afford security systems or lawyers or even the rent on her firefighter's salary, which had been suspended along with her job. Her savings would last maybe 2 months. She sat in her living room, surrounded by boxes she'd started packing. One hand on her belly where her daughter slept peacefully, unaware that the world was trying to destroy her mother. The sound started just before dawn, a low rumble that built gradually, like distant thunder rolling closer. Taylor woke from uneasy sleep on her couch, confused and disoriented. The rumble grew louder, resolving into the unmistakable thunder of motorcycle engines. She pulled aside the curtain and stared. 17 motorcycles lined the street in front of her house, their chrome catching the early morning light. The riders were dismounting, men and women in leather vests marked with the Road King's insignia. Neighbors were emerging from houses, drawn by the noise, uncertainty plain on their faces. A figure walked up her driveway, leaning heavily on a cane. Diesel looked thinner than he had in the collapsed garage, his face still bruised, but his eyes were clear and determined. Taylor opened the door before he could knock. "You remembered," she said. "Road Kings don't forget." He gestured to the assembled riders behind him. "I told them what you did, what you risked. The whole club wanted to come, but I told them to keep it to the local chapter. For now." A woman with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes stepped forward. "I'm Josephine, club secretary. And you, Taylor McKenna, have a problem." "Several problems," Taylor admitted. "We know," Diesel briefed us. Josephine pulled out a tablet, scrolling through notes with the efficiency of a seasoned paralegal. "Suspension pending termination, whistleblower retaliation, harassment, probable lawsuit from Aldrich Development, and a baby on the way with no support system. Did I miss anything?" Taylor's throat tightened. "That covers it." "Good. Here's what we're going to do." Josephine's voice was crisp, businesslike. "Boone handles our legal work. Used to be a prosecutor before he got tired of working for corrupt politicians. He'll represent you at the termination hearing and file protective orders against Aldrich's intimidation tactics." A lean man with wire-rimmed glasses nodded from the edge of the group. "Cole's a structural engineer," Josephine continued. "He'll review your inspection reports and provide expert testimony about the garage collapse. Adrienne over there is an investigative journalist. She's already started digging into Aldrich Development's history of code violations and political donations." Each person she named stepped forward slightly, acknowledging their role. Taylor felt dizzy, overwhelmed by the precision of this operation. Morgan used to be a cop, now does private security. She'll coordinate protection until the threats stop, and Hawkins run the construction company. He'll handle the repairs on your house and install a proper security system. "I can't afford any of this." Taylor's voice cracked. "I'm barely making rent. You saved Diesel's life when everyone else said it was impossible." Josephine's expression softened. "You crawled through hell while pregnant because you believed he was worth saving. That kind of courage creates a debt. The Road Kings pay their debts." Diesel stepped closer, his hand steady despite the cane. "You said my life mattered, all of it. Well, your life matters to us now. All of it, your career, your safety, your baby. We're not leaving until this is fixed." The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind. Boone worked 18-hour days building Taylor's defense, compiling evidence of the fire department's gender discrimination and Aldrich Development's criminal negligence. Cole's engineering analysis of the garage collapse was damning. The structure had been doomed from the start, built with substandard materials and falsified load calculations. Adrienne's articles appeared in the local paper, then got picked up by regional outlets. She documented Aldrich's pattern of cutting corners, bribing inspectors, and silencing whistleblowers. Taylor's inspection report became Exhibit A in a growing scandal. Morgan and 2 other club members maintained a rotating watch on Taylor's house. When men in expensive suits showed up trying to intimidate her, they found themselves facing tattooed bikers who smiled politely and suggested they leave. The threats stopped. Hawkins's crew repaired her window, replaced her slashed tires, and installed security cameras and motion sensor lights. They worked weekends and refused payment, waving off her protests. But it was the women of the Road Kings who truly changed everything. Josephine organized a schedule. Someone was always available to drive Taylor to doctor's appointments, help with grocery shopping, or just sit and talk when the stress became overwhelming. They threw her a baby shower that filled her living room with gifts and laughter. They taught her about childbirth and breastfeeding and managing the terror of being a single parent. They shared their own stories of struggle and survival, and Taylor realized she'd found something she hadn't even known she was missing: a family. The termination hearing arrived on a cold March morning. Taylor walked into the administrative conference room to find Chief Brennan and 3 department officials on one side, and Boone with a mountain of documentation on the other. Behind Taylor, the gallery was packed. Every member of the Road Kings who could take the day off work was there, along with Adrienne and several reporters she'd invited. Boone was methodical and devastating. He presented evidence of gender discrimination in Taylor's personnel file. Assignments denied, promotions passed over, capability questioned in ways her male colleagues never faced. He showed that male firefighters had violated orders under similar circumstances and received reprimands, not termination. Cole testified about the garage collapse, explaining in technical detail how Taylor's inspection report had accurately identified the structural flaws that led to the disaster. He noted that her knowledge of the building's layout was the only reason Diesel had survived. Any other rescue attempt would have failed. Then Boone called Diesel to the stand. He walked in still using his cane, wearing dress slacks and a button-down shirt that looked uncomfortable on his frame. But his testimony was clear and compelling. "I was dead," he said simply. "The rescue team said so. The engineers said so. Everyone had written me off except Taylor McKenna. She saw a way when everyone else saw impossibility. That's not recklessness. That's courage and competence." The hearing officer, a gray-haired man named Chen, who looked perpetually skeptical, leaned forward. "But she violated direct orders while pregnant. Surely you can see how that raises questions about her judgment." "I see how it raises questions about a system that values orders over lives," Diesel replied. "And I see how my question about her judgment is, where do I find more firefighters like her?" The hearing took 6 hours. When it finally concluded, the officer promised a decision within 2 weeks. Outside, reporters mobbed Taylor, shouting questions about the scandal, her pregnancy, and her future with the department. Morgan and 3 other bikers formed a protective cordon, guiding Taylor to a waiting motorcycle where Diesel sat astride his rebuilt shovelhead. "Hop on," he said. "You look like you could use some air." Taylor hadn't ridden a motorcycle since high school, and never while pregnant. But she climbed on behind Diesel, wrapping her arms around his waist. The engine rumbled to life, and they pulled away from the government building, the rest of the Road Kings falling into formation around them. They rode to the coast, where the Pacific crashed against black rocks under a gray sky. Diesel parked, and they walked carefully down to a bench overlooking the water. Taylor's daughter was active now, rolling and kicking, responding to the motion and the fresh air. "Win or lose?" Taylor asked. "You already won," Diesel said. "You proved you were right about the building. You exposed corruption. You survived intimidation. Keeping the job would just be bonus. I need the job." For her, Taylor placed both hands on her belly. "I need the health insurance, the salary, the stability. You'll have all that. One way or another, we'll make sure of it." Diesel stared out at the ocean. "You know what the hardest part of addiction recovery is? And yeah, I'm in recovery, 7 years sober now. The hardest part is learning to accept help. Learning that accepting help isn't weakness." "I'm not good at that," Taylor admitted. "Neither was I, but my club taught me that strength isn't doing everything alone. Strength is building something bigger than yourself." He turned to face her. "You built something when you saved my life. You built a bridge between your world and mine. Now let us help you finish building a life that includes your daughter and your career and your safety." The decision came down 10 days later. Taylor was reinstated with full back pay and a formal commendation for valor. Chief Brennan was reassigned to training duties pending his retirement. Lieutenant Chen was promoted to chief. The fire department issued a public apology for the gender discrimination Taylor had faced, along with a new policy review to prevent future bias. Aldrich Development's executives were indicted on charges of fraud, bribery, and criminal negligence. 3 city inspectors were arrested. Taylor's inspection report became a case study in construction management programs across the country. But the biggest change came quietly, in a meeting at the Road Kings clubhouse 3 weeks before Taylor's due date. Josephine presented her with a leather vest, not the full club colors, but a supporter vest embroidered with "Protected by Road Kings MC," and a smaller vest, sized for an infant, with matching embroidery. "For your daughter," Josephine said, "so she always knows she has family." Taylor went into labor on a Wednesday evening in late June. Morgan was at her house within minutes, timing contractions and gathering her hospital bag. Diesel met them at the emergency entrance in his truck. The rebuilt shovelhead wasn't suitable for transporting laboring women, he noted with a grin. Labor lasted 14 hours. The Road Kings rotated through the waiting room in shifts, unwilling to leave her completely alone even though hospital policy limited visitors. Chen came with flowers and stayed for 3 hours. Adrienne arrived with a camera, documenting what she called the end of the story that started in the rubble. At 6:23 a.m. on Thursday, June 24th, Taylor delivered a healthy baby girl, 7 pounds, 4 ounces, with dark hair and lungs that announced her displeasure with the world immediately and forcefully. Taylor held her daughter and cried, for the fear and pain and struggle of the past months, for the joy of this moment, for the strange and wonderful path that had led her here. She needs a name, the nurse said gently. Taylor had thought about this for weeks, cycling through possibilities, never finding one that felt right. But looking at her daughter's face, the answer was suddenly obvious. Hope, she said. Her name is Hope. They allowed visitors one at a time. Diesel came in first, his eyes suspiciously bright as he looked at the tiny bundle in Taylor's arms. She's perfect, he said. And terrifying. How is something that's small also that scary? Welcome to parenthood. Taylor smiled, exhausted but content. You can hold her if you want. He looked panicked. I don't know how. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. Diesel sat carefully in the chair beside the bed, and Taylor placed Hope in his arms. The big man went still, cradling the infant with surprising gentleness. Hope's eyes opened, unfocused but somehow seeming to study his face. Hey there, kid, he whispered. Your mom's the bravest person I've ever met. You're going to do amazing things. He'd brought a gift, the tiny leather jacket he'd joked about months ago. But it was real now, custom-made with protected embroidered on the back and the Road Kings logo on the breast. Too big for a newborn, sized for a toddler, but perfect as a promise. For when she's ready to ride, Diesel said. 6 months later, Taylor stood in the station house wearing her uniform, ready for her first shift back on active duty. Hope was with Josephine at the clubhouse, where a rotation of club members provided childcare for working parents. Taylor had worried about leaving her daughter, but the women of the Road Kings had been caring for children for generations. Hope would be safe, loved, and probably spoiled. Chief Chen now met her in the apparatus bay. Ready? Ready. Taylor paused, looking at the new photo on the station wall. It showed her and Diesel at the collapse site, both of them battered and bloody but alive. The caption read, "Courage under fire. You know half the department thinks you're crazy," Chen said. Only half? The other half wants to be like you. Chen's smile was warm. You changed things here, Taylor. Not just policies, but culture. People are asking different questions now. Not can we, but should we let fear stop us? The alarm sounded. Structure fire, commercial district, all units responding. Taylor pulled on her gear with practiced efficiency and climbed into the engine. Her crew greeted her with nods and grins, accepting her return without ceremony or fuss. She was one of them again. She'd always been one of them, really. It had just taken crawling through hell to prove it. As the engine pulled out into traffic, sirens wailing, Taylor felt her daughter's weight in her arms as clearly as if Hope were there. Felt the Road Kings at her back, solid and unshakable. Felt the future opening up before her like a road stretching toward the horizon. She'd learned something in that collapsed parking garage, something that went deeper than rescue techniques or structural engineering. She'd learned that the measure of a life wasn't in avoiding risk, but in knowing what risks were worth taking. That courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. That family wasn't always blood. Sometimes it was found in the most unexpected places, forged in fire and sealed with loyalty that ran bone deep. Diesel had said she was protected, but the truth was more complex, more beautiful. They protected each other. That was what community meant. That was what mattered. The engine raced through morning traffic, and Taylor McKenna smiled, her hand resting briefly over her heart where courage lived, and rode toward whatever came next. In the end, kindness creates its own kind of gravity, pulling people together in ways that transform them all. A pregnant firefighter crawling through rubble to save a stranger. A biker club mobilizing to defend a woman who'd defended one of their own. A daughter who would grow up knowing that courage runs in her blood and that she would never, ever stand alone. Some debts can't be measured or repaid. They can only be honored, passed forward, built into something larger than any single person. Taylor McKenna saved one life in the darkness beneath tons of concrete, and 17 motorcycles arrived to save hers. But the real rescue was mutual, a reminder that we are all worth saving, and that sometimes the people we least expect become the ones who teach us what family truly means. If you have enjoyed the story, tell YouTube to send you more stories like this by subscribing to this channel, liking the video, and leaving a comment.